It's the Sometimes Daily Show, and as it's Friday, we've got a lovely show for you today. A really nice feel-good story. One that lets us all come together and collectively dunk on some arsehole who has a real shitty take. But before we get into it, I'm Philip Edwards.
And I'm Michael Palmer. Let's tell you the tale of Alex Hutchinson. While his name may not be familiar to you, some of his other hot takes should be. This is the same guy who proudly brought us, quote, "Game journalists are racist for liking Japanese-made video games over something like Gears of War," end quote. And my personal favourite, "Women are too hard to animate."
Following on in his long tradition of shitty takes, he brought to us, get ready for this, it's going to be a long one because I'd like to quote him in its entirety, quote, "Streamers worried about getting their content pulled because they use music they didn't pay for should be more worried by the fact that they're streaming games they didn't pay for as well. It's all gone as soon as publishers decide to enforce it," end quote. He then continued by saying, quote, "The real truth is the streamers should be paying the developers and publishers of the games they stream. They should be buying a license like any real business and paying for the content they use," end quote.
Now, I'm so certain that you can all see the flaws in his reasoning that we're not going to bother taking it apart like we normally would. Instead, we're all going to collectively enjoy the absolute destruction that is the replies. Let's start with Jacksepticeye, who pointed out that Alex is using an unlicensed piece of fan art as his Twitter banner. The added spice, though? It's fan art of Jacksepticeye, not Alex. Alex also had the absolute balls to crop out the watermark from the original artist and not give credit to them in any way.
The amazing game reviewer Skill Up, please notice us senpai, had this to say, quote, "It's hard to imagine Stadia is struggling so much when their brain trust is firing off these bangers," end quote. Senior editor at The Verge, Tom Warren, made this parody version of the tweet, quote, "The real truth is the game developers should be paying the streamers for the games they stream. They should be spending a marketing budget like any real business and paying for the content they generate. The real truth is that Twitch is free marketing for game publishers," end quote.
The last and possibly the best reply comes from a H-Bomber guy who quite simply said, quote, "I'd quote tweet you, but I'm afraid you'd ask for royalties," end quote. Now let's take a second before we wrap up to tell you about this guy's arrogance. Before all of this went down, he proudly stated in his bio that he is a creative director at Google Stadia. Now the funny thing is, he isn't. He is a creative director at a small studio that was acquired by Stadia back in December. His bio now says creative director at SG&E Montreal Studios. Something tells me someone at Stadia had some really polite words asking him to change it.
Without swearing and going off script, it would be impossible for us to truly convey how we feel about this tool. I will say, from us here at the show, Alex Hutchinson should take a look at all of the bad press he's just brought upon all the hardworking people at Stadia. He should realise the pain they go through on a daily basis, the grind they're subjected to under him, and he should resign. That's going to be it for this week. Remember to like and subscribe and tell us in the comments what your favourite reply to this bell was. Also, remember to check back next week for more daily shows, because if you don't, I'm going to charge you a license fee for every time you see our videos but don't click on them. Because if I've learned one thing from this story, that's how licenses work, right? So, see you next week.